Welcome to the writing workshop brought to you by the Kathleen Jones White Writing Center at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. My name is Krista Saraf, and today's topic is APA documentation. As a student, I use APA style frequently, and here I want to clue you in on some of the most important things I've learned about APA documentation. At the Kathleen Jones White Writing Center, tutors are here to help you with your paper. Writing Center tutors can help you with every part of the writing process. Our online Writing Center lets you meet with a tutor. You'll also find handouts and videos to help you with your writing assignments. There are 3 ways to get help with your paper. The Writing Center is located on campus at Eicher Hall, but you will also find us in Stapleton Library or online. Today you'll learn why it's important to document outside sources, the advantages of using APA style in a research paper, how to cite sources in your text using APA, and how to create an APA references list at the end of your paper. There are lots of ways to convey citations. Readers find it helpful when a writer uses the same format, such as APA, throughout the paper. Citations also allow the writer to give credit to the other writers whose ideas or words they've borrowed. Citing your sources correctly shows your reader that you're professional and that you're trustworthy. In the Writing Center, one of the most common questions tutors get is when to cite. We advise that you should always cite when you borrow words from any source. You should also cite anytime you borrow ideas from a source. Maybe you're paraphrasing or summarizing parts of it. Maybe you're lifting keywords or phrases or pooling statistics or facts, or even using information from tables, graphs, or diagrams. In all of these situations, you must cite. We just discussed why it's important to document outside sources. Now, let's talk about the advantages of using APA style in particular in a research paper. APA style was developed by the American Psychological Association in 1929 by editors of psychology journals who wanted to make it easier for people to read research within their discipline. It became such a useful guide that other fields adopted it. So today, many social scientists use APA. Other disciplines may use APA style for certain writing assignments. So you will want to check with your professor to see if APA is appropriate for their class. Some of the fields include psychology, linguistics, sociology, economics, criminology, business, and nursing. Because APA style is widely recognized by researchers throughout the world, it makes it easy for writers to be consistent. APA style is not overly complicated, but let's review some of the basics. Okay, a few basics. The most important thing to note here is that every in-text citation must correspond to a reference on your reference page at the end of your paper. It's also important to note that in APA, you'll need to double space everything. And unlike MLA style, APA papers must have a title page. Let's take a closer look. Here's an example of a title page for an APA paper. A few things to notice. On the left-hand corner, you include the words running head and the title in all capital letters. In the top right-hand corner, notice that you include the page number, so the page number actually appears on the title page. Center your title, your name, and your school, and make sure to use 12-point Times New Roman font. Finally, be sure that everything is double-spaced. Beyond including a title page, you'll want to be sure to cite your sources both within your paper and on your reference list. Let's look at an example. Notice how the in-text citation includes the author's last name, the year of the publication, and some of the student's own writing before the borrowed material in quotes. Finally, notice that the page number is in parentheses at the end of the quote, and that the letter P and a period is included as well. Keep in mind that this isn't the only way to incorporate borrowed material. We'll talk about some other examples in a little while. Okay, so let's take a closer look at how to cite sources in your paper using APA. There are three key parts to in-text citations. The signal phrase signals that what follows is borrowed from an outside source. Then you include the outside material, which is placed within quotation marks. Finally, you include the parenthetical reference, also called an in-text citation. Since we didn't say the author's name in the signal phrase, the in-text citation includes that information as well. And here's something important to note. Keep in mind that because the student is borrowing an outside writer's materials, the student cannot change the words within the quotation marks. Again, you can use the three key components of an in-text citation, the signal phrase, outside material, and parenthetical reference, but arrange it differently. Here, the author's name is in the signal phrase, so you only put the page numbers in the parenthetical reference. APA favors keeping the author's name and the date together, so the year of publication, 1996, is placed beside Rumstein in parentheses. Keep in mind, though, that in APA a group can serve as an author. For example, corporations, associations, government agencies, and study groups should be used. In this example, the University of Pittsburgh is the group that authored this quotation, so that's why University of Pittsburgh appears as the author. Let's look more closely at the first part of the in-text citation, the signal phrase. Signal phrases help to indicate where the borrowing of another author's idea begins and ends. So when you're quoting, you use a signal phrase to show the shift between your own ideas and the quotation. You also should use a signal phrase to paraphrase or summarize another writer's work. We'll look at an example in a moment. Signal phrases should help your reader to move between your words and the quoted material. In order to make the signal phrase clear to the reader, use strong verbs. A strong verb helps to connect the author to the material so the reader knows who the material belongs to. For instance, you might say, Smith argued, or research studies illustrated, or findings have suggested. Here's an example where the author's name appears in a sentence before the actual quote. Let's zero in on the signal phrase, she wrote. Notice the punctuation. With APA, the comma appears before the quotation mark. Here's another way to say it. Notice that the phrasing, one researcher illustrated, takes the emphasis away from Smith and places it on the quotation. Now, let's suppose that instead of directly quoting an author, you decide to paraphrase or summarize. This is a good move because APA tends to encourage paraphrasing and summarizing over quoting. Here's an example. Pay attention to the bolded text. That's the signal phrase. Notice the author's last name, Smith, the year, 2012 in parentheses, and the page number, 61 in parentheses, at the end of the sentence. APA encourages writers to include a page number when you paraphrase if it will help the reader to find the relevant passage. But the most important thing to remember is that even when you paraphrase, you still need to signal where the paraphrased material comes from. And the best way to do this is to include the author's name as the signal phrase. Okay, what about using direct quotes in your paper? With APA, the style guide is more concerned about conciseness, so editors want you to summarize more than you quote. You can use direct quotes, but you should try to synthesize your ideas about the source and use your own summarizing and paraphrasing skills whenever possible. However, keep in mind that disciplines like English, education, business, and sociology are more accepting of direct quotes. So if you're going to use a direct quote, it's helpful to look at how to do this in APA. Let's look at some examples. Here's an example of a direct quote. Specifically, this example shows you how you might modify a quote, such as when you want to add a word to clarify for the reader. Notice that in APA we use brackets, not parentheses, to insert material into a quotation. So another question that students often ask us at the Writing Center is if it's okay to delete words from a quote. The answer is yes, so long as you don't alter the meaning. To delete words so that you only use a part of the quote, insert an ellipses in place of the deleted text. Let's look at another common scenario. Let's say that you need to cite a resource written by two authors. You do so within your text simply by using the word "and" to separate the authors' names. However, the parenthetical citation is a little bit different. The ampersand for parenthetical citations is a way for the publisher to save space. Note the ampersand between Walton and Myers in the example on the screen. Take a moment to practice citing a source by two authors. Which example is correct? The correct answer is A. When referring to two authors within your paper, use the word "and" between their names. Now let's practice identifying which parenthetical citation is correct. Go ahead and read through the example on the screen. Is it A, B, or C? The answer is B. Use an ampersand between authors' names in an in-text citation. Okay, what if you have multiple authors for the same text? If there are more than two authors, for instance, let's say your source has 3, 4, or 5 authors, you name all of the authors the first time you cite the source. Next time, use et al. For 6 or more authors, list only the first author's name followed by et al. Another common question we get in the Writing Center is what to do about long quotes. APA allows you to include lengthy quotations in your paper, but if the quote is 40 or more words, you create what we call a block quotation. A block quotation is a special way to format the text within your paper so that it makes sense for your readers. You indent 5 spaces from the left margin or 1/2 inch. Don't use quotation marks, and be sure to double space the quote. Here's an example. Notice the colon before the quotation, that the quotation is indented, that there are no quotation marks, and that everything is double spaced. With APA style, it's important that you cite the original source. This means that if you see a quotation in a source, your best bet is to track down the original quotation. Otherwise, you might be incorrectly quoting that author since the message might have been lost in translation. You can use the words "as cited in" if the author is very difficult to find or if it's in another language. Okay, so can you use footnotes? Rarely. There isn't anything a footnote can say that you can't put in your paper. Most style manuals urge you to include the material in the main body of your paper or leave it out, and APA is no exception. However, you should use footnotes if your instructor specifically asks you to do so. Okay, so we've discussed why we cite outside sources, the benefits of APA style, and how to cite sources within your text using APA. Now let's discuss how to create a reference list at the end of your paper. You can find lots of examples of reference list citations. You can look at examples from reputable sources, such as in the APA publication manual. Just make sure that you look at the 6th edition since that's the most up-to-date version. You can also visit owl.purdue.edu for examples. That's the online writing center of Purdue University. Now, of course, you're not going to use bright colors in your reference list, but we've color-coded this example to make it easier for you to see the different types of sources. For instance, the red example is how to cite a website. The orange example provides a model for a website with multiple entries by the same author, and a website with the same author. The yellow is an example of a newspaper, the green a dictionary, and the blue another website. One of the most common sources you'll probably cite, though, is a book. Keep in mind that APA likes to keep the author's name and the publication year beside each other. Also notice that the author's last name and first initial only are used. Another common type of source that you may use is a journal article. Because journal articles share the most up-to-date research, they're commonly used sources in academic papers, such as those for which you'd use APA style. Note that some journal articles provide a DOI, an acronym that stands for Direct Object Identifier, and that this is often provided on the first page of the document. If your article provides a DOI, include it in parentheses with a colon between DOI and the number. If there's no number, don't worry, you don't have to include one. Beyond books and articles, you may also include something from the internet on your reference list. Since there are many types of internet sources, such as videos, articles, and tweets, just to name a few, your best bet is to look up an example in the APA Style Manual. If you click on this link, you'll be redirected to the Purdue OWL, where you can see a variety of resources available on the site. To access information directly related to APA Style, scroll down through the options and click. You can see a sample APA paper. Note that there is a link to the sample paper on the bottom of the main APA page. Okay, so we've covered a lot of material today. Let's review. We discussed why it's important to document your sources, and we mentioned various reasons, such as that ethically you need to give other writers credit for their work. We discussed how helpful APA is as a style manual because it allows you to cite your sources in a consistent, credible way that readers will recognize. Then we went over multiple examples for how to cite sources within the paper and how to create that corresponding reference list at the end of your paper. If you have questions or would like one of our trained tutors to consult with you about your paper, you can reach us on IUP's campus or online. Thank you for tuning in for this workshop from the Kathleen Jones White Writing Center at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. We'll see you again soon, and in the meantime, happy writing!